They laughed when she missed the target. But when it mattered most, she didn't miss. The sniper they rejected became the only one who could save them. The dust never settled. It was a fine, pale powder that clung to everything, turning green fatigues a ghostly shade of beige. It puffed up in little clouds with every footstep on the gravel path between the prefab huts of Forward Operating Base, Kestrel. Inside the Tactical Operations Center, the TOC, the air tasted of stale coffee, sweat, and the electric hum of 24 servers. This was Sergeant Eva Rostova's world now, a world of screens, radio headsets, and the quiet, thankless job of monitoring drone feeds and communication intercepts. The door swung open with a metallic groan, letting in a blast of heat and a sliver of blinding afternoon sun. Corporal Davis and Specialist Miller, the Overwatch team, stepped inside. They were loud, their gear clattering as they dropped helmets on a table. They smelled of gun oil and the cocky assurance of men who held lives in their hands from 1,000 yards away. "Anything on the feeds, Rostova?" Davis asked, not really asking. His eyes were already on the coffee pot. He was blonde, with the kind of sun-bleached confidence that came from being the best and knowing it. Eva didn't look up from her monitor. A drone was tracing a slow, lazy circle over a silent, sun-baked village. Nothing new on the eastern ridge. Thermal shows 2 goats and a shepherd, same as the last 4 hours. Miller chuckled, a low, condescending sound. "Keep an eye on those goats. They're shifty." Davis poured a sludgy cup of coffee. He leaned against Eva's console, peering at her screen. "Still staring at pixels, huh? Beats staring down a scope, I guess. Less demanding." The comment hung in the air, sharp and precise. Everyone in the talk knew the story, or the rumor of it. They knew Sergeant Rostova had been in the advanced sniper course at Quantico, and they knew she wasn't there anymore. The official line was a medical discharge from the program. The rumor, the one Davis liked to imply, was that she'd washed out, that she couldn't make the cut when the pressure was on. Eva's fingers never stopped moving across the keyboard. She tagged the shepherd's location, her movements fluid and economical. She gave no sign she'd heard him. Calm, silent, composed. Davis smirked and took a loud slurp of his coffee. "Well, let us know if you see any bogeymen. We've got a real job to do. General Markinson is wheels down in 30. He and Miller moved toward the main briefing table where Captain Thorne was mapping out the general's route from the landing zone to the command tent. Thorne was a man stretched thin, his face a roadmap of stress. He pointed a finger at the map, his voice tight. "Overwatch is you two," he said, nodding at Davis. "Standard positions. Rooftop of the infirmary. You'll have a clear line of sight on the LZ and the entire walkway. I want positive ID on every single person in that courtyard. No exceptions." "We've got it, sir," Davis said. "It's a turkey shoot, 200 yards max. We could make that shot with a musket." Thorne's eyes flicked to the weather monitor. "Wind is picking up, coming out of the north. Pass. It gets tricky up there. It'll be swirling by the time he lands." "Don't worry, Captain," Miller chimed in, patting the long, heavy case that held his rifle. "We'll account for it." Eva finally looked up from her screen. Her gaze drifted to the weather monitor, then to the large, high-resolution satellite map of the base. She saw the infirmary. She saw the landing zone. She saw the way the North Pass created a natural funnel between 2 low hills, aimed directly at the open space of the courtyard. Her eyes lingered for a moment before returning to her drone feed. No one noticed. An hour later, the low, rhythmic whump, whump, whump of an incoming Black Hawk helicopter began to beat against the air. The sound grew, vibrating through the floor of the TOC, rattling a pen on Eva's desk. The radio crackled to life. It was Davis's voice, calm and professional. "Eagle 1 in position. I have eyes on the LZ." Captain Thorne stood behind a comms specialist, his arms crossed, his jaw tight. "Any movement?" "Negative, Command," came the reply. "LZ is clear. A few of our guys, but that's it. It's quiet. Too quiet." "It's always too quiet, Davis," Thorne muttered to himself. On one of the large screens at the front of the TOC, a live feed from Davis's scope appeared. A circle of shimmering, sun-blasted gravel. The image was incredibly sharp, but it wavered slightly, distorted by the heat rising from the ground. The helicopter grew louder. a deafening roar that swallowed all other sound, and then settled. The rotor wash kicked up a blinding storm of dust outside, coating the windows of the TOC in a fresh layer of grime. Through the haze, figures emerged. General Markinson, a tall, broad-shouldered man, was surrounded by his security detail. "Command, I have positive ID on the general," Davis's voice crackled. "He's on the move." The group walked briskly, their heads ducked low. They moved, along the designated path, directly in Davis's line of sight. Everything was going according to plan. Eva kept her eyes on her own screens. She had switched from the drone to a series of sensors scattered across the base. Barometric pressure, humidity, wind speed and direction from a dozen different anemometers. A stream of raw data scrolled down the side of her monitor. Captain Thorne watched the main screen, his knuckles white as he gripped the back of a chair. Then, a new voice on the radio. It was Miller. Anxious. "Damn this mirage. The heat off. That metal roof next door is bending everything," Davis cut in, his voice losing its earlier calm. "I've got him." "Wait. Hold on." There was a pause. The silence stretched for 3 seconds. 4. 5. "The wind it's shifting. It's not steady. 1 second it's 5 miles per hour from the north. The next it's 10 from the northwest." On the main screen, the crosshairs in the video feed drifted, corrected, then drifted again. "Davis, what's your status?" Thorne demanded, his voice sharp. I can't get a stable read, sir. It's like a vortex out there. The flag on the command tent is blowing east, but the dust at my feet is swirling west. My Kestrel is giving me 3 different wind holds." A bead of sweat trickled down Captain Thorne's temple. The general was halfway across the courtyard, now exposed, vulnerable. Eva's eyes were locked on her data stream. She watched the numbers from the anemometer on the infirmary roof, then the numbers from the one on the comms tower, then a third on the perimeter fence. They were all different, wildly different, but they weren't random. She saw a pattern, a rhythm, a pulse. She stood up, her chair scraped back, a harsh, sudden sound in the tense room. Every head turned toward her. Captain Thorne shot her an annoyed, impatient look. "What is it, Sergeant?" "I'm busy." Eva walked past him, her boots making no sound on the rubberized floor. She stopped at the main console, her eyes fixed on the wavering image from Davis's scope. She ignored Thorne, ignored the dozen pairs of eyes on her. She looked at the shimmering air, at the distant, blurry image of the general, and at the subtle way the heat haze from a rooftop air conditioning unit 200 yards away was being bent by an unseen force. She leaned toward the radio microphone, her voice quiet but carrying across the entire room. "Corporal Davis," she said, her tone perfectly even. "You're looking at the wrong wind." A heavy silence fell over the TOC, thick and suffocating. The only sounds were the hum of the electronics and the frantic, tinny voice of Corporal Davis coming through the speaker. "Command, what was that? Who is that?" Captain Thorne turned, on Eva, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. "Sergeant, what in God's name do you think you're doing? Get off that comm." Eva didn't flinch. Her eyes remained locked on the screens. One showed the wavering feed from Davis's scope. The other showed her columns of data. Her voice was still quiet, but it cut through the tension with the clarity of a bell. "Sir, Corporal Davis is reading the ground wind and the rooftop wind. They're both wrong." She pointed a steady finger at the main monitor, at a spot, just above the general's head, where the air seemed to shimmer more intensely. "There's a thermal updraft coming off the corrugated metal roof of the barracks. It's hitting the downdraft from the north pass about 50 yards out from the infirmary. It's creating a horizontal rotor, a vortex. The wind at his position is calm, but the air the bullet has to travel through is a blender." Thorne stared at her. The technical jargon, delivered with such calm certainty, stopped him cold. He looked from Eva's face to the screen, then back again. He didn't understand half of it, but he understood the conviction in her voice. "Command, I need an answer!" Davis's voice was strained, bordering on panic. "I have no firing solution!" "How do you know that?" Thorne demanded of Eva, his voice a low growl. "The anemometer on the barracks reads a 3-mile-per-hour updraft. The one on the north fence reads a 15-mile-per-hour crosswind. Neither is registering on Corporal Davis's Kestrel because he's in a dead zone, but the bullet won't be. She traced a line on the screen with her finger. The path of the round will pass directly through both. They cancel each other out for the first 400 yards, then the crosswind takes over completely for the last 200. It was the most anyone had heard her say in 6 months. The detail was arcane, obsessive. It wasn't the knowledge of an analyst. It was the knowledge of a shooter. A very, very good one. Suddenly, a new voice cut through the comms. It was Miller, Davis's spotter. "I've got something. A flash. High window, 3rd floor of the eastern block. The abandoned one." Every muscle in Thorne's body went rigid. "Davis, can you confirm?" "Negative. I can't see it. The mirage is too thick. It's like looking through water." The general and his security detail were still walking, oblivious, halfway to the command tent. They were in the middle of the kill zone. Thorne looked at Davis's struggling feet on the screen. He looked at Ava, who stood by the console as if she were carved from stone. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the problem. For a split second, the captain's face was a war of pride versus desperation. Pride lost. He jabbed a finger toward Ava. "Talk him through it." The comm specialist looked at the captain, wide-eyed, then back at Eva. Eva simply leaned forward, her hand steady as she keyed the microphone. Her voice was transformed. It was no longer quiet or reserved. It was crisp, authoritative, and utterly calm. "Eagle 1, this is Rostova. Stop looking at your instruments. They are lying to you." There was a stunned silence from the other end. "Rostova? What the hell is this, Captain?" "Listen to her, Davis," Thorne barked into his own headset. "Now. The target is the 3rd floor window, middle of the building," Eva continued, her tone clinical. "You cannot see the shooter, but you can see the glint. Your mirage is boiling up from the left. Aim for the bottom right corner of the window frame. That is your true center mass. That's a blind shot. The wind is not your problem," Eva said. "Forget the wind. I'll give you the hold. Set your elevation for 600 yards. No more, no less." 600? Davis's voice was incredulous. "The target is less than 250. I'll shoot 10 feet over his head." "No, you won't," Eva said. "The thermal updraft will cushion the round and hold it high for the first 400 yards. When it clears the roofline, it will hit the crosswind from the pass. That crosswind is a downdraft. It will force the round down. Hard." She paused. "Your elevation is for 600 yards. Your windage is 2/10 of a mile to the right. Trust me." The TOC was dead silent. Everyone was watching the screen, watching the wavering crosshairs. They could hear Davis's ragged breathing over the radio. He was being asked to defy everything his training and his instruments were telling him. He was being asked to trust the ghost from the talk, the woman who'd supposedly failed. "Why would it drop that much?" Davis asked, his voice a mix of defiance and a desperate need to understand. "Because the air coming out of the pass is colder. It's denser," Ava said, never raising her voice. "You're shooting from warm air into cold. The barometric pressure change will slam your bullet down like a hammer. Your instruments can't read it from where you are, but it's there. I can see it on the sensors." Captain Thorne stared at Eva, a slow, dawning realization on his face. He remembered the line in her file. Discharged from USMC Scout Sniper. School, advanced course. Reason: failure to obey a direct order resulting in a missed shot during final qualification. He had assumed it meant she panicked. He never considered she might have been right and her instructor wrong. "I still can't see him clearly," Davis grunted. The frustration was palpable. Just the flash. On the main screen, a tiny, brilliant glint of light flashed again from the dark square of the distant window. Unmistakable. The sun reflecting off the lens of a scope. The general was less than 50 feet from the safety of the command tent. A bead of sweat rolled down the comms specialist's face and dripped onto his console. Eva leaned closer to the microphone. Her voice dropped, becoming more intense, more personal. A command rapped. "In council, Corporal. Stop trying to see him. See the shot. See the path. Bottom right corner of the window frame. 2/10 of a mil right. Take the shot on your next exhale." A beat of silence. Then Davis's voice, tight with tension, stripped of all its earlier arrogance. Just one word. The air in the talk was so still it felt solid. Every person in the room held their breath, their gazes fixed on the main screen, on the wavering, heat-distorted image of a distant window. Through the speakers, they could hear the faint sound of wind whistling past Davis's microphone, and then something else. The slow, deliberate sound of his breathing. Inhale, hold, exhale. A sharp click echoed in the tense silence, the sound of a rifle's safety being disengaged. Eva stood motionless, her eyes on the screen. She saw what Davis saw, nothing but shimmer and glare. But she also saw what he couldn't, the invisible currents of air, the pockets of heat and cold, the complex chaotic physics of the shot. Then, the sound came. A single, sharp, explosive crack that ripped through the radio, so loud the speaker popped. It was followed by a half-second of complete silence. In that silence, the world hung suspended. Then Miller's voice, breathless, shouting, "Hit! Holy, it's a hit! I saw the glass shatter! He's down! Target down!" A collective gasp went through the talk, followed by a wave of relieved, nervous laughter. The comms specialist slumped in his chair, wiping a hand over his face. Men clapped each other on the shoulder, their adrenaline turning to giddy relief. The general and his security detail, alerted by the shot, were already being rushed into the armored command tent. The crisis was over. Captain Thorne didn't move. He didn't celebrate. He simply stared at Eva. The fury and impatience were gone from his face, replaced by a look of profound, unsettling awe. He saw the woman who had been quietly tracking data in the corner for months, the woman he had dismissed as a washout, and he understood that he had been blind. The radio crackled again. It was Davis's voice, but it was unrecognizable. The swagger was gone. The confidence had been stripped away, leaving something raw and humbled in its place. Rostova, he sounded winded, as if he'd run a marathon. How? How in the hell did you know? The round dropped 3 feet in the last 100 yards. I've never seen anything like it. Eva finally stepped back from the console. Her shoulders, which had been rigid with focus, relaxed by a fraction. She looked at the comms specialist and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. He keyed the mic for her. "The data was there, Corporal," she said, her voice once again quiet, reserved. "You just have to know how to read it all at once. The temperature, the pressure, the humidity, they all tell a story." "That wasn't a story," Davis said, his voice barely a whisper. "That was magic." Eva turned away from the console and walked back toward her own station. The other analysts and officers in the room parted for her, their eyes following, her with a mixture of fear and reverence. She sat down, her movements as calm and economical as they had been 2 hours before, and began closing the sensor data windows on her screen. Just another task completed. Captain Thorne walked over to her desk. He stood there for a moment, watching her. The usual noise of the talk slowly returned, but it was muted, respectful. "Sergeant Rostova," Thorne said, his voice low. Eva looked up at him. "Your file says you were removed from the sniper program for disobeying an instructor's order. It says you missed a qualification shot." Eva's gaze didn't waver. She gave a slow, single nod. "Yes, sir. That's what it says." "The instructor gave you a wind call," Thorne continued, thinking. "Aloud more than asking. And you used a different one." "Yes, sir." "You saw something he didn't see," Thorne stated. "It wasn't a question." "I saw a heat mirage coming off a vehicle parked next to the range," Eva explained, her voice soft, devoid of any resentment. "It wasn't in the manual. It wasn't on the instruments. But it was there. I calculated a hold for it. The instructor told me to trust the fundamentals. He ordered me to take the shot his way." "So you disobeyed the order," Thorne said. "I took the shot I knew was right," she corrected him gently, "and I missed the target." Thorne stared at her, finally understanding. She hadn't failed. She had chosen integrity over blind obedience. She had trusted her own impossible, brilliant perception of the world over the flawed commands of her superiors. She had been right, even when it made her wrong. And today, that same integrity had saved the life of a general. A long silence settled between them. Thorne looked around the humming, buzzing command center, then back at the quiet woman sitting before him. He finally saw her not as a failed sniper, but as the most lethal weapon in his entire arsenal, and he had left her in a corner to stare at pixels. "Sergeant," he said, his voice thick with a respect he had never shown her. "If there is anything you need, anything at all to do your job better, you tell me." Ava looked at the screen in front of her, at the drone feed showing a peaceful, empty courtyard. She considered his offer, this sudden, radical shift in her reality. She thought of the mockery, the condescension, the quiet disrespect. She felt no need for revenge. She felt no need to brag. The shot had spoken for itself. She finally met the captain's gaze, a flicker of a new kind of power in her calm, clear eyes. "I'm fine, sir," she said, "but a second monitor would be helpful."